Thank you so much for joining us, Terry, on the Dwellynn show. I really, really appreciate your time. I know we've been trying to book this for a while now, so I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Ola. I appreciate it. Looking forward to visiting with you.
Awesome. So, Terry, you're like, pretty amazing when it comes to, IRRs. I've been doing some reading about what you guys are doing at Sunwest Trust. And I kind of want to just to get you on the show. You can tell our listeners a little bit about yourself and kind of what you've been up to lately.
Okay. Well, I'm an old guy, so I've been in business for 30 years. Actually only been in the custodial self-directed IRA business for 14 years. But I came from an entrepreneurial family. My parents were, my dad was a builder most of my life. And so I always knew I was going to be in business somehow, but I wasn't sure what. And I ended up in this, and I love what I do. I love coming to work every day, and we love the opportunity to help people with their retirement account. And then I own an escrow company. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that, but basically what that company does is it's a mortgage servicing company for owner financing. So owner financing on real estate, we service that also.
Oh yeah, I really like the spin of the owner financing. I did not know that actually. So That's really, we can talk a little bit more about that later. So you said your father was a builder. So, how did you get into the real estate game? What was that, kind of draw into the game?
Well, when I got out of college, I have a degree a business degree with a concentration in accounting. So I was fortunate enough to get a job as the controller for a local title company here. And I did that for 4 years. I didn't really as it turns out, I don't like being told what to do. And so working for somebody didn't work out that well. And I tease telling people this, but it's really true. I basically quit my job in order to avoid being fired. And then we started this escrow company. And in the meantime, before that, as far as real estate is concerned, I've done some investing in actual physical real estate. I own a couple of commercial buildings, and I own some rental properties and stuff. But my first taste of real estate was in buying contracts, buying debt instruments on real estate. So I'm very familiar with that, and I've done several hundreds of those over the years.
Wow, there's a lot in there I'm trying to unpack. So, when you say debt instrument, right, can you tell our Dwell listeners what that really means, and just maybe give us an example of how to actually invest in paper and what that entails?
Well, so like I said, I own an escrow company, and so in New Mexico, it's a little different in every state, but in New Mexico, we have a thing called a real estate contract, which is an agreement between two people where the seller of the real estate says that, okay, I'll act as the bank for you, Ola. So I've got a house that's worth $100,000. You want to buy it. You've got $10,000 down. And so I tell you, I'll take your $10,000 and then I'll act as the bank for the remaining $90,000. And so I may have you make monthly payments to me of, let's just say $1,000 a month at a 6% interest rate. So what happens is people like the idea of getting that $1,000 a month at first. And then sometimes a few years down the road, they decide, man, I really need a chunk of money. It's nice having the $1,000 a month, but I need a big chunk of money. And so I had the opportunity back when I was with the title company. My assistant came to me and said, my parents sold their house and now they need some money. I can't remember what they were doing. Usually people want to maybe they want to make another investment. Maybe they want to buy a new car. Who knows what they want to do. So I said, well, I'll buy that contract from them. So what you do is I would give them a lump sum of cash for the right to receive those monthly payments for the entire remaining term on that agreement. And you would do that at a discount. So for instance, in our example where I sold you my house for $100,000, you gave me $10,000 down, you owed me $90,000. Let's say 3 years down the road, you owe me $82,000. Well, I might come in and buy that somebody might come in and buy that from me for say $70,000. And so when they do that, the face interest rate on it is, let's say 6%, but because you're buying it at a discount, the yield to the person that buys that is much higher than that. Let's say maybe 12%. And so what I did when I first started in this is I bought that contract from my assistant's parents. And then I was trying to figure out, okay, I went to the bank and borrowed the money for 90 days. And I thought I could just turn around and sell that, find an investor who wanted a return and wanted the monthly income. Well, I had a hard time finding that. So I was getting close to the 90 days running out. And so I had a friend of mine, actually was my Sunday school teacher at church, that was a financial planner. And I called him and said, let's go to lunch. I got a deal for you. And this was back in the 80s. And I said, I've got this investment that I can sell you that'll give your investor a 12% return. And he was like, that's awesome. I could sell those all day long. So that's kind of where I got into it. I started buying contracts and then brokering them and making a spread in between. And really that's what I lived on, what paid my mortgage payment and stuff for the first 4 or 5 years after I started this business.
Wow, somebody's listening to this thinking, oh my goodness, like I didn't even know that existed. And there's obviously different twists to this kind of arrangement. You could do that, and you could even maybe refinance out of the house. There's different ways to exit. So that's
absolutely.
Really, yeah,
absolutely. Just as another example, we just bought one the other day. We bought a contract on some 3 fourplexes. And so we bought it at a discount, and then we contacted the people that were paying on it. So the original buyer, and we were able to get them to refinance. We gave them a $20,000 discount, which made them happy. And they refinanced and paid us all our cash off, and we walked away with a profit too. So there's a lot of things you can do with that. It's very interesting.
It is. So that's really good. A good, I guess, segue to IRLs, right? And a lot of people, IRA, and they go, well, what is it first and foremost? And do I even have one? And if I do have one, can I really use it for real estate? So there's a lot of questions about IRRs, and there's traditional, there's Roth, there's self-directed. There's just a lot of terms. So can we just break it down? What is an IRA, just to start?
Well, let me try to do that. It's like I said, it's a lot of information. But so first of all, IRA stands for Individual Retirement Account. So Congress created these, I think, back in 1974. And the idea is that people needed to save money for their retirement. So they'd have something in addition to, their Social Security, because we all know Social Security, number one, it's not enough to live on. And number two, it may not even be there, when somebody your age actually gets to the point where you want to start taking it. So they, and the interesting thing too, is the government said, we want to start encouraging people to save for retirement, but we don't want them to save too much. So they put a limit on the amount you can contribute every year. So right now, if you're under 50 years old, you can contribute $5,500 a year. So it takes some time for someone to build one up large enough that they could buy real estate or something. But I think what I really like to do when I get an opportunity to talk to people is say, it doesn't matter where you start as far as how much you put into it, just start. Put something into an IRA. Even if you just go to a bank and put it in a savings account, start putting something in there. And if you're young, you've got tons of time, and time is on your side to build that up to a sizable amount. But the kind of business that Sunwest Trust does, my company does, is allow people to invest their IRA in the non-traditional type assets. So in other words, when I say traditional, I mean stocks, bonds, mutual funds. But we allow people to invest in things other than those. So the IRS doesn't tell you what you can invest in, they tell you what you cannot invest in. And so basically they say you cannot invest in life insurance or collectibles. So other than those two things, everything's open. So for your purposes, we'll talk about real estate, but so someone could buy a piece of vacant land that they think will be worth a lot more in a few years. They could just buy it and hold it in their IRA. Someone could buy a rental property and rent it, and the income that rental property creates will go into their IRA, either tax-free or tax-deferred. Someone could buy, you have to be a little more careful if you're going to buy and flip houses, simply because if you do too many of them, it's considered a business. So you could do 1 or 2 a year maybe. You can't do any of the work on them. You have to hire somebody to do the work. But the returns that you get, the profits that you make, will be either tax-deferred or tax-free, depending on the kind of IRA account you have, meaning a traditional account or a Roth account. Does that give you an idea?
I think that's a good stuff for For sure. So if we're thinking about doing any of these activities, right, we know what the IRS has told us not to invest in. However, what we really care about is we want a good return on our money, right?
Absolutely.
So if somebody has a IRA right now with their company, like an employee-sponsored IRA, and they want to start to use that money as opposed to just letting the money, stay idle, what's the first step?
Okay, well, so first of all, if you're with a company, typically what you're going to have is a 401k. And it's a lot of semantics, and generally they're all the same thing, but they're different. If you have a 401k with a company that you're working for, most likely you'll just have to invest in whatever they'll pick a basket, if you will, of things that you can invest in, and you can choose those. What we see, the kind of business that we see is someone who worked for a big company, maybe for 5 or 6 years, and they built up maybe $60, $70, $100,000 in their 401k. Then when they leave that company, they can then take that 401k and do what's called a direct rollover into an IRA. So that's where someone has enough value, has enough money in their account that they can really start doing something. And that's where that person might be the one that could take that and invest it in a piece of real estate.
And that process of rolling over the funds are pretty simplistic. I think you have to get a custodian. I mean, what's that process? How does that process look like?
Okay, so let's talk about just doing a direct rollover from a 401k with an employer that you used to work for, and putting that in with a custodian such as Sunwest. So what you do is they need to go out and find a custodian. If they have an idea what they want to invest in, I would tell them to find a custodian that will allow you to invest in what you're thinking about. So, you wouldn't want to go out and find a custodian, and then after you've moved your account to them, find out they don't allow real estate if that's what you want to invest in. So that's the first thing to do. Then I would look at, and I just did a video about this just before we got on here. Then I would have them look at the fee structure of each custodian to determine, with the kind of investment they're wanting to make, find the best fee structure that works best for them. Because we all charge our fees differently, charge different ways based on asset value, flat fees, based on number of assets, those kinds of things. Once you've determined those, then, I would also, again, because this is a big chunk of money that means a lot to you. So take the time to check into the custodian, make sure they're licensed. Most of them are state licensed in different states. A lot of them, for some reason or another, are licensed in South Dakota. We happen to be licensed here in New Mexico. But do some checking on the custodian. Make sure they're a legitimate custodian and you're comfortable with sending your money. And then it's just a matter of, you go to the plan administrator that you had on the 401k, and you tell them, I want to move my money to this custodian. And you go to the custodian and you open an account. So with what that's called a direct transfer. So when you do a direct rollover, when you do a direct rollover from a 401k, the transfer of the money gets initiated at the plan administrator for the 401k, and then you open the account with the custodian, and they move the money over to the custodian, and then it's sitting in the custodian's account waiting for you to tell them what to invest in.
Fantastic. So I saw this very interesting statistic, right? Of 42 million IRAs in the United States, only 3 to 5% are actually self-directed.
Absolutely.
Why do you think that's the case?
Well, number one, I think because the banks and the brokerage houses have a lot more money to advertise than companies like me, so people just don't know about it. It's really a matter of education. We get calls weekly from people who have either talked to their CPAs or actually from CPAs who say, my client wants to buy a piece of real estate in his IRA, and I keep telling him it's illegal. And then we have to explain to them, no, it's not illegal. If any of your listeners want to know, if they can't sleep at night, sometimes they can go to the Internal Revenue Code, Section 4975 and Section 408. Those are the two sections of the Internal Revenue Code that talk about self-directed IRAs and what you can invest in and what you can't invest in.
So what are the things that we can invest in? So what are the 5 ways that we can actually use our IRA to invest in real estate?
Well, so like I said earlier, you can't invest in life insurance and collectibles. So, you can't go buy, you can't go buy that Banksy painting that they just shredded a week or so ago and have that in your IRA because that's a collectible. So that leaves everything else open. Then the only thing you have to be careful about is your IRA cannot do business with what is called a disqualified party. And the IRS defines disqualified parties as your family, yourself, your family, and people who provide services to your IRA. So what that means, Ola, is you cannot, I get calls where people say, hey, I want to start a self-directed IRA and I have this piece of real estate I want to put in it. Well, you can't do that because the only way you could get that in your IRA is have your IRA buy it, and you're a disqualified party. So your IRA can't purchase that asset from you individually. Your family, the IRS defines your family as your ascendants and descendants. So your parents, grandparents, kids, grandkids. So for instance, my IRA couldn't buy a house and then rent it to one of my kids because they're a disqualified party. So the other thing is if you do business with those disqualified parties, that creates a thing called a prohibited transaction. And that's something you want to avoid at all costs because there are big penalties and it's just, they'll disallow your entire IRA and you want to avoid that. So people need to be careful, but those are very small guidelines in my mind. And there is a lot of other things out there that you can invest in. I like to say one of my favorite clients here is a friend of mine that owns 6 free and clear houses in his IRA. He's generating about $8,000 a month income into his IRA that's tax deferred. And he's done that just by, he bought one house free and clear, and then the income from that created enough money that he was able to buy another one and another one and another one. So now he's got 6. To me, that's just like one of the perfect examples of what can be done in a self-directed IRA.
I'm sure some listeners are thinking, oh my God, that's what I want. And that's really fascinating that, you can do that with a tool that, some people didn't know that actually existed, right? They have a lot of this money sitting and they feel like they can't use it. So my last question is it possible for somebody that actually has a 401k right now with a company and they haven't left their job to somehow leverage that money into a IRA? Is that possible?
I would say no. There might be somebody out there smarter than me that knows a way to do that. But unless you're over 59 and a half, if you're over 59 and a half and your 401k has what's called an in-service distribution, then you could do that. But if you're under 59 and a half and you're with the company, you kind of just have to you have to invest it in what they'll allow you to invest it in that 401k. So until you get outside of that, till you leave that job, that 401k is kind of tied up in that particular place. But I would encourage people, like I said, even if you have a 401k at your job, start putting money into an IRA also, and start building that up because, I'm 58 years old. I probably have never retire because I love what I do, but you've got a lot of time. If we're talking to somebody who's 25 or 30 years old, and if they would start putting away $5,000 a year into their IRA, by the time they get, into their 40s, they're going to have a sizable amount of money, and they can actually take that out and do something, invest that in something worthwhile.
Fantastic. So we're definitely dwelling into the quick round. This is going to be a round of quick questions and quick answers. You ready, sir?
Yeah.
First question. What makes Terry unique? What is that differentiating factor that separates you from the next guy or the next girl? You can talk about Sunwest Trust too.
I knew you were going to ask that question because I listened to your podcast and I'm not sure I came up with a good answer. I'm just, I think what makes me different is, like I said, I love what I do. I love being in business. And kind of the reason I'm in business, the reason I do what I do is all focused back towards my family. I've got, a wonderful wife and 3 kids and now 2 grandkids. So that's what's important.
Yeah, I can somewhat relate. I have a young baby girl, so I can
That's what I heard.
Yeah. Second question. What was the last book that you read? And what was the one thing that you picked out from that book?
I am one of those people that I am really, really good at starting books, but I'm not very good at finishing them. So I think the book I'm reading right now is a book called Thinking in Bets. Have you heard of that?
No, not that one.
Well, it's kind of cool because the person that wrote it was a professional poker player, and they talk about how, you know, you can look at the entire situation and make a decision based on what you know, and it could be the perfect decision for what you know, and the outcome still might turn out bad. So you just, you know, what I'm getting from it is like, you do the best you can, you make the best decision you can. The outcome is whatever the outcome is, and you go on and you play the next hand, and you do the best you can then. So I think it was very interesting to me, because a lot of us, we always look at the outcome from something, and if it was a good outcome, then that means it was the right decision. If it was a bad outcome, it was a wrong decision, but that's not always the case.
Absolutely. Sometimes it feels like we forget to learn from that outcome that we didn't expect, right? We just think, oh, that was a bad outcome, then Absolutely. I'm not going to learn from it. So
yeah. And you know, the book talks about, even if you have a good outcome, but it was a bad decision, that's a great learning opportunity. What did I do wrong in that decision? And how did I luck out and this come out to be a good outcome, even though it was the wrong decision?
Wow, fascinating. I have to check that one out. So yeah. You're doing a lot of great work with Sunwest Trust. You're educating people about, you know, IRAs. You've got a ton of stuff going on. What do you do for fun? I know you kind of mentioned family in the beginning.
Yeah, my family, I've got two grandsons that we just adore and have a great time playing with. And then I love to fly fish. So whenever I get a chance, I get out and fly fish, get out in the mountains. And, you know, fishing is kind of like business. Sometimes you go out there and work really hard and you don't do very well. And sometimes you don't work as hard and you just catch lots of fish. So I really enjoy that.
What's fly fishing? Never heard of that.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Well, did you ever see a movie called The River Runs Through It with Brad Pitt?
I don't think I've seen that.
Okay, you need to check that out. But it's a fishing, you fish in streams and you get out in the middle of the river and you use, you tie these flies that look like real flies, but they have a hook in them, obviously. So, you know, you throw them in and try to fool the fish that that's a real fly and get him to bite it, catch fish. And I don't eat them. I'm not a big fish eater, but I just catch and release, and it's just a great time. You know, it's one of those things that I'm not sure where you are.
Baltimore, Maryland.
Okay. Well, here I'm not, and I've been there, and you don't have any big mountains like we have here, but you know, just to get out in the mountains and a little stream and, you know, wade around in the water is it's just a great way to, you know, rejuvenate yourself.
Oh yeah, I can only imagine. So if I'm a Dwell listener listening on our conversation of fly on the wall, and I'm like, I really liked what, you know, Terry White is talking about. I want to, you know, connect with Terry. I want to learn a lot more about how I can deploy my IRA. What's the best way to reach out to you or get connected with you?
You know, there's a lot of ways, but I think as far as the IRAs are concerned, they could go to our website, and that's sunwesttrust.com, and just click on the contact us, and that'll get to me that way. I also mentioned to you that I have a podcast that's called Focused on Biz. And so you can go to focusedonbiz.com. And even if you're interested if you're a small business owner or something, I'd love to have you on my podcast. They can register for that and I can find them that way. So either through my website, sunwesttrust.com, or my podcast, focusedonbiz.com.
Thank you so much, Terry. I really appreciate your time today. We learned a ton, and I'm sure we'll probably have you back on the show sometime in the future. Thank you so much.
Great. Thank you very much. I've enjoyed it.